Roman Renaissance. Hitler heads south to harden his pact of softening steel. From the Brenner Pass, which links Germany and Italy through the Alps, his official train races to Rome for a high meeting of state. The Fuhrer controls all Europe. But after 4 years of war, his Axis partner, Italy, has sunk to the status of a satellite. Italy's dictator, Mussolini, and Italy's king, Victor Emmanuel III, greet their German overlord. All Rome is on dress parade. But behind the props of the black-shirted fascists, it is the brown-shirted Nazis who call the tune. Grandeur that was Rome, debased, mocked, to make an Axis holiday. After 2 decades of dictatorship, Mussolini's regime still retains its outward flamboyance and flashes a gaudy front to the world. But the foundations of fascism are crumbling. Its days are numbered. This is the twilight of an era. Across the blue waters of the Mediterranean, on the hot sands of newly won North Africa, Allied commanders dream, plan, perfect the design which will bring the Axis to its knees and bring Allied soldiers to the continent of Europe. Sicily is the stepping stone. General Montgomery will command the British troops, General Patton the Americans. The greatest convoy yet organized, almost 3,000 ships and landing craft, from ports stretched all the way east to Suez, all the way west to Gibraltar, will deliver the punch on which hangs the fate of the Italian Empire. In July 1943, the convoy puts to sea under the scrutiny of His Majesty, King George VI. 160,000 Allied soldiers move toward Sicily. No enemy action challenges the passage of the ships, but another and more awful hazard intervenes. In the path of the smooth-sailing convoy, a storm is making up. Unseasonable, unpredictable, threatening weather. It is too late to turn back. Land-loving troops sail into the tempest. convoy and its men weather the storm. Sicily, ancient fortress, forgotten kingdom, rugged island separated by a mere 2 to 12-mile strip of water from the Italian mainland. But it takes 6 weeks of vigorous fighting before Sicily falls, and the last prisoners from the broken ranks of the Axis call it quits. Weather, ignore man's war. Again, nature lashes the Allied sailors, this time carrying Axis prisoners back to North Africa. Allied ships may found, but of greater significance, fascism itself has foundered. From Genoa, from Spezia, the Italian fleet sails to its demise, sails to the island of Malta to surrender. The long, cruel naval battle for the Mediterranean is over. Tiny Malta, which has endured the worst of Axis lashings, ironically becomes the scene of Axis dissolution. It is September 1943. Italy signs an armistice. Mussolini has fallen. His successor, Field Marshal Badoglio, brings Italy over to the Allied side. But if the Axis is broken, the dominant half remains intact. The Germans turn Italy into an occupied country. Mussolini and his fascists are now the slaves of Hitler and his Nazis. From France and from the Balkans, the Germans send fresh troops into their new province of Italy. Their high command has calculated correctly. The next Allied blow will fall in the Gulf of Salerno, 185 miles northeast of Sicily, on the Italian coast. The attack comes, and the Germans are waiting. September 9th, 1943, exactly 4 years after the beginning of World War II. The United States Fifth Army and the British 10th Corps hit the Italian mainland, knocked the first hole into the fortress of Europe. Salerno is only 40 miles south of Naples, the greatest port in southern Europe. That is what the Allies are after. But first they must slug it out with the Germans. The Gulf of Salerno becomes the Gulf of Despair. Sailors give close, continuous support to the soldiers. The invasion becomes a duel of cannon, guns afloat against guns ashore. Italian bases, the German Luftwaffe throws everything it has against the invaders, hoping to smash the landings and pin down the Allies south of Naples. The beachhead, the Italian campaign, hovers in the balance. airways, German propaganda blankets the world with the news that the invaders are being thrown into the sea. But the flow of Allied men and supplies continues in the face of a new, fearsome weapon used by the Germans for the first time, the remote-controlled glider bomb. Is added the protecting cloak of destroyers' smoke screens. Survival on the beachhead rests on survival of the ships that support it. Sicily and at Salerno, the landing ship's tanks, the LSTs, are formally christened in action, in fire. They are destined to become an integral part of all future amphibious operations. The Germans launched their crucial counterattack, delivered with all the skill and fury that have made Hitler's legions the terror of Europe. The Allies are almost split in two, almost driven off the beaches. Almost. October the 1st, 1943. Naples. The Germans have failed. The Germans fall back to the north. The Allies have their port. A city reeling from air raids, ravaged by typhus, ricketed from hunger. But for the Neapolitans, defeat means peace. For the troops, Naples is only a way station on the weary march to Rome. Vedi Napoli e poi muori. See Naples and die. It is an old saying, but war has given it a new and bitter meaning. Thousands have died for the harbor of Naples, and the Germans have systematically, ruthlessly, thoroughly ruined it, sinking every ship, blocking every channel. But such as it is, the Allies have it. One of of the greatest salvage feats in the annals of war is performed by Allied engineers in the Bay of Naples. Within a fortnight, the harbor is operating. Within a month, 50 hulks are raised and the port is clear. Clear to receive the avalanche of supplies needed to sustain and broaden the Italian campaign. Naples is the reward for the ordeal of Salerno. Pile up. But inland, at Cassino, the Germans stand entrenched, immovable, and the campaign becomes a bloody, futile stalemate. Checked on land, the Allies counter with a sweeping flank attack by sea. From Naples and Salerno, a convoy sails 120 miles up the coast to Anzio, only 30 miles south of Rome itself. The Americans call it an end run. The British call it a cat claw. 50,000 troops are put ashore behind the flabbergasted Germans. January 22nd, 1944. The initial landings are unopposed, but Allied success is checked by Allied error. Instead of swift exploitation and immediate breakout, the invaders dig in, giving the Germans time to rally their defenses, time to isolate, imprison the beachhead in a perimeter of steel. The hell of Salerno pales before Anzio's inferno. From captured bases at Foggia, Allied airmen fly to the rescue of their frantic comrades at sea and on land, sailors and soldiers whose blood holds Anzio. And from the Balkans, the Germans bring in more planes to slaughter the precarious invaders. Anzio, intended as a swift, decisive stroke to open the road to Rome. Anzio, in reality, 123 days of incessant carnage. A long-drawn nightmare. It was January when the Allies landed at Anzio. It is May when the Germans collapse. 3 crack Nazi divisions have been destroyed. 30,000 young men are lost to Hitler. In from the coast and up from the south, the Allied armies stream together, forming a swelling, flowing tide whose billows are lashed by victory. The march begins. The march to Rome. Destruction is the benediction of fascism, of dictatorship. In Italy, Hitler has been compelled to squander and disperse his forces, weakening his Russian front, sapping the strength needed to oppose impending Allied landings in France. The price paid by the Allies on the Italian front today will be refunded in France and Russia tomorrow. And Mussolini? He and his age pass into history. Northward flee the Germans, northward to turn and fight again. But Rome is free, free again. The city of all time and of all the world. And all the world, it seems, comes marching into Rome on this 4th day of June in the year 1944. The Americans come and the British come. So do the Canadians and Greeks, the Indians and Irish, the South Africans and French, the Moroccans, the Poles, Brazilians, Dutch, and the Italians too. An army speaking 40 different languages, all with the same meaning. Roman Renaissance. The rebirth of a city, the rebirth of a nation, the rebirth of freedom for the humble, the oppressed. now, D-Day. On June the 6th, 1944, an Allied expeditionary force will invade the continent of Europe. That day must come. Casablanca, in January of 1943, the Allies commit themselves to the liberation of Europe, while their soldiers, sailors, and airmen storm the gates of Tripoli. North Africa is yet to be won, but the combined chiefs of staff speak their distant dream to cross the Channel, return to the continent. The chiefs of state christen this supreme operation with a noble code name, Overlord. In London, a year later, the Supreme Commander, Allied Expeditionary Forces, General Eisenhower, takes up the task of piercing the heart of Germany and destroying her armed forces. But across the narrow English Channel lies the ultimate barrier, Hitler's Atlantic Wall, formidable guardian of Festung Europa, the fortress of Europe. Field Marshal Rommel, the Desert Fox, one-time hero of the Africa Corps, commands the coastal defense. He multiplies the fortifications and sows death on the beaches for those who dare transgress. But there is no roof on the fortress of Europe, and assault from the sky begins long months before the day called D. This is the key that unlocks the gate. Paralyze Germany's war machine. Pound the Luftwaffe into impotence. And the troops, the men who must finish what the bombers have begun. Each month, the United States pours 150,000 of her young men onto the British Isles. All England becomes an armed camp, one vast depot of armament and supplies. At the appointed hour, a torrent of materiel and men will be set in motion. Southward to the Channel, southward to the embarkation ports, southward to destiny. It is spring, 1944. The date has been set. The hour has been chosen. Men committed to the assault are sealed in ships for secrecy. Ports, camps, and assembly points are cut off from the outside world. There is nothing to do but wait on tide and weather. Wait and get ready and keep ready and wait and wait. Gentlemen, the King. From Falmouth, from Portland, from Plymouth, from Weymouth, the ships depart. From different ports, the ships sail at varying intervals to arrive at the 5 landing beaches together. 5 beaches stretched 60 miles over the coast of France. First to invade will be the paratroops. Their mission is to support the landings. Intelligence officers have warned the Supreme Commander that the airborne assault is too hazardous to succeed. But without it, the landings may fail. Eisenhower faces a crucial decision. Should he risk the slaughter of 2 superb divisions, or should he cancel the drop and imperil the whole invasion? He orders the paratroopers to France. Gliders go in. France is below. There are crack-ups and casualties, but the paratroopers accomplish their mission. Tactical air squadrons fly 5,000 sorties to support the amphibious assault. Ships will converge on France with the precision of a dress parade. the Luftwaffe has been broken. The U-boats driven from the channel. The vanguard of 35 divisions moves unmolested toward the beaches. Warships prepare to open the assault with a barrage of gunfire. Battleship Nevada is there, torpedoed at Pearl Harbor, a flagship at Normandy. Naval guns open the Western Front. Inside Hitler's Atlantic Wall, the Nazis know what the world does not. The assault is on. Defeated in the north, defeated in the south, defeated in the east, the Germans have but one hope left. Destroy the invaders from the west.
Tons of concrete float across the channel. Artificial docks called mulberries to hide their top-secret purpose. Huge, hollow blocks of cement that will be sunk offshore, forming piers. Few things are predictable in war. Sometimes casualties are lightest, where heaviest losses are expected. And often the worst fighting takes place, where none is anticipated.
But whichever way the battle turns, each man must face his ordeal alone. Merchant ships are deliberately sunk to build a breakwater that shelters the shore under its lee. Together with the Mulberry units, they form a man-made harbor. Tons of supplies pour in with the invading troops, not afterwards when it might be too late. Human ingenuity rises to the challenge of invasion. But one factor, one all-important factor, remains beyond human control. What the might of the German Army, Navy, and Air Force is unable to do, the worst channel storm in 80 years almost does. But the invaders hold the beaches. And in the ports of England, wave after wave is mounted to build and broaden the landings. The Allied Expeditionary Naval Forces execute their mission to assure the safe and timely arrival of troops, weapons, supplies. A mission which will have a profound effect on the history of man.
This program will be interrupted from time to time to bring you the latest news bulletins as they are received in the newsroom. Keep tuned to your favorite NBC station to keep in step with all the latest developments on this Invasion Day. And now the orchestra opens the program with the revival of an old hit, Blue Room. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt this program to bring you a special broadcast.
This is George Hicks speaking. I'm now speaking from the tower above the signal bridge of an American naval flagship. And we're lying some few miles off the coast of France, where the invasion of Europe has begun. It is now 20 minutes to 6.
Behind the landings, Allied planes release a barrier of bombs that cut off German reinforcements, paralyze German countermoves. Every road,
Every bridge, every rail line, every canal, all the way back into Germany, is smashed, isolating the French beaches. Every 75 yards, a landing craft heads for the shore and touches down. Resistance is furious from German suicide squads, but the Americans go in and hang on by their guts. Of Dunkirk returned to France, this time to stay. The British soldiers who beat Rommel on the sands of Africa helped destroy him on the sands of Europe. The architects of invasion view their work. Eisenhower and Admiral Ramsey, commander of Allied naval forces. Commander of American naval forces, Admiral Stark. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, commander of the 1st United States Army. Field Marshal Montgomery of El Alamein, commander of Allied ground forces. After invasion, the breakout, the swelling Allied armies stream inland into Europe. Behind the survivors lie those who died to enslave the world, and those who died to free it.